Welcome to our May edition of Let's Get Growing and Let's Get Growing. Plant caladiums and elephant ears when the night temperatures are consistently at 70 degrees. You can also plant this list of ground covers and hot season annuals that are listed below. Continue to plant those warm season turf grasses. And here's a long list of vegetables that you can finish planting this month. Now plant your perennial herbs either in the ground or containers this time of month. And remember, if you're going to plant herbs, put them near the back door or near the kitchen door so that you're able to get them, because if you put them way out in the backyard, you're not going to cut them and use them when you cook. You can also plant hardy varieties of palms this time of the month. And here's a list of some tropical plants you can plant right now. And remember, you can prune Forsythia and Hawthorn after they quit blooming. And then prune your climbing roses after the blooms have faded on the spring growth. And then after the foliage is dried on those spring bulbs like daffodils, you can snip that back. Remember, don't prune your oak trees between February 15th and June 30th. Roses, ornamentals, and vegetables, you're going to watch for aphids and powdery mildew. Continue your homeowner's fruit and nut spray schedule. Check roses for black spot and apply fungicide according to label directions if needed. But plant resistant varieties and you won't have to fight it. Earth-kind roses are the ones that do well in our area. Watch for those bagworms on junipers and conifers. We want to get those as soon as possible because once they've made that bag, you can't treat and you'll be hand picking. Check eowanomus, hollies, and crepe myrtles for scale. Remember, we have crepe myrtle scale. If you notice that the bark or the stems on your crepe myrtles are black, then you have crepe myrtle scale. And they're going to be little tiny white spots and easily cared for. Just use, once again, horticultural oil. And we're heating up in the landscape, so you're going to start watching your ornamentals and your annuals and even your vegetables for red spiders. Remember, they're on the underside of the leaf, and we're going to look for the little webbing because they're so small you may not see them. Easily treated with just a strong spray of water, mist on the underside of the leaves once a day for 7 to 14 days, and you'll be rid of them. Now continue mowing your warm season turf grasses every 5 to 7 days. St. Augustine will be about every 5 days. Bermuda can go to 7. Okay, now mow your Bermuda grass at 1 1/4 inches to 1 1/2 inches, and then St. Augustine will be a little taller. We're going to do it at 2 1/2 inches to 3 1/2 inches in the shade, 2 1/2 in the sun and 3 1/2 in the shade. Watch for chinch bugs on your St. Augustine. You'll see brown spots and then treat as necessary. Now, we're going to mulch those new plantings and bare spots in our beds because it's going to keep the beds cooler, keep the weeds down, and you won't have to use as much water. And be sure to keep those new plantings wet and watch for dry spots in your beds and your lawn and water accordingly. And don't forget, feed the birds. Today we're doing some fibrous rooted begonias, and I wanted to start out by showing you some interesting things. If you'll look at this flower, see how it has this little bump on the bottom? But if you look at this flower, there's not one. That's because this is a female flower and this is a male flower. This is actually the ovary where the seeds will be. And you can kind of see it's kind of brown in there or darker. And that's telling us that there are seeds in there. And they're little tiny things. Because they're so tiny, it's really hard to get them to germinate. But I'm going to show you an easy way to propagate. You can do a stem cutting, which would be just basically breaking it off at a joint. And then we're going to remove these bottom leaves to prepare it for its little installation. This is actually what we call vermiculite, and you can see it's been moistened. And then we're going to not pack it really hard, but pat it down a little. And then we can just take our cutting and stick it into the container. oh my goodness, look at these leaves. What are we going to do with them? Well, guess what? We can make new plants out of these also. We're just going to make a little hole, and we're going to make sure that we plant this little area where the stem hits the leaf in the soil. Nestle it down in there, and then put your soil around it or your vermiculite. The reason we use vermiculite is it is sterile, and so we have a sterile environment and we won't get any fungal infections on our cuttings. Plants that grow in the shade are usually wider, thinner, and they have more green in them. So let's make some babies off of this plant. Now this one's going to be a little bit different. You see how long the stem is on this leaf? So we're just going to pinch it back. And then once again, where the stem hits the leaf, we want to make sure that that little node is covered in this vermiculite. So we make a little hole, settle the leaf in, and firm the medium around it, but we're not going to pack it down. If plants move, they don't root. So you can see, even though it's blowing in the wind, it's fairly stable in the media. So you can take this and just put it on your windowsill in the kitchen and water it when it's dry, and you should have some new begonias sprout out right here. Remember, you can also make a stem cutting. So we're going to just break it off. We're going to do this one a little bit longer. It's interesting, we're going to have to take the flowers off. The reason that we're taking these flowers off is if a plant is blooming, it's not putting its nutrients into making roots. So keep the flowers picked off, then we're just going to clean it up a little bit, and stick it in to the media. Firm it a little bit. And remember, if they start to wilt, you can mist them, but begonias like to be a little dry. So don't keep these too wet and just watch them. It's going to take more time for the leaves to root than it will for the stem cuttings. But give them at least a month and up to 3 months on the leaves. Remember, they grow in spite of us, not because of us, and leave them alone. Water them when they're dry. You're going to have new begonias.